Welcome to the Intuitive CEO podcast, a space where we explore the future of leadership at the intersection of AI, intuition, and psychology. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can create truly happy workplaces, harness the power of human connection, and redefine success in our fast-changing world. I'm your host, Gemma, Master Intuitive Psychology Coach, co-founder of The Happy Workplace, and CEO of HubGem, where I've seen firsthand how culture, people-first leadership, and technology can combine to build award-winning organizations. Today, I'm joined by John Kelleher, founder and CEO of SpotDev, an engineering-led digital transformation consultancy and one of the UK's leading HubSpot solutions partners. Specializing in RevOps, data strategy, AI transformation, and intelligent system integrations, John's work is all about tearing down silos, driving operational clarity, and helping teams scale with precision and purpose. Before founding SpotDev, John spent many years in leadership and education, bringing a deep understanding of people, performance, and systems thinking into how he now leads and builds teams. So in today's episode, we're exploring a theme that sits at the heart of modern business: the balance between leadership and management. We'll be diving into what great management looks like, how culture and accountability coexist, and where intuition and human judgment still matter in an increasingly data-driven world. I've known John from our work in the HubSpot ecosystem for a number of years now, and we've collaborated on some recent projects. It's always a pleasure working with him, and I can't wait to hear his insights. So John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Gemma. And equally, it's always a pleasure working with you, so I'm very glad to be here today.
Thank you. So you have got a wealth of experience across both education and then in building businesses. So I'd love to understand a little bit more about your journey and what sort of work you're most passionate about.
I don't know if I'd say it's a wealth of experience. I've definitely got a varied experience. I've spent my life in all sorts of careers, really. I initially started off working in sort of the local music scene, moving on to selling credit cards whilst walking through Sainsbury's. I was briefly the person that you'd phone up on the national lottery line if you won or if you had a complaint, mostly the latter. But then, like you said, I spent 10 years as a secondary school music teacher, finished up as an assistant head teacher before I moved on to the marketing and technology services world. So I like to think that breadth of experience gives me some insight and some alternative angles that I can bring to things. But I'm also very conscious that maybe that just means I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Well, I mean, that's quite a leap, right? From education into business. And it's actually a leap I know very well too, having come from an education background before starting a business in the same sort of space. So what is it that what gets you out of bed in the morning?
I think for me, what gets me out of bed in the morning is always a new challenge, is something to think through, a puzzle to solve, a new angle to take on something that we've done the same way in the past. That was very much how I approached things in the education world. I was always looking for the newest and most innovative approaches, whilst also still looking for proven approaches. And it's the same that I've taken in the business world. We've always looked for what's the zag to everyone else's zig that we can take. If everyone is going in a particular direction, how can we do a really good job of going in another direction? And that's always been my general philosophy. By and large, that's worked. It seemed to work well in the education space, and it's certainly seeming to work for us in the SpotDev land at the moment.
Love that. The zig to the zag.
Yeah.
So you've said, we've had some conversations before today, and you've said that UK business culture has spent too long worshipping leadership and then undervaluing management. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. What's led to that realization for you, and what does that mean?
Yeah, I think it maybe goes even beyond leadership in the UK and beyond business. I think it's been almost a fetishization of leadership as a concept for at least the last 20 years. As long as I've been trained in leadership, certainly I felt that that's been the core. And it's easy to see why, isn't it? We've got all these inspirational leaders. Everyone will always shout about a Steve Jobs, or everyone will be inspired by a Walt Disney character Walt Disney as a character. We'll all be inspired by these types of inspirational leaders. And of course we are. They're inspirational. They're leaders. So we're all programmed to be inspired by them, to be wanting to follow them. That's absolutely the case. And of course we want to do that. But in the background behind that is the stuff that actually makes the day-to-day difference. The management, for every Steve Jobs, in the background until he took over, was Tim Cook. For Walt Disney, it was Roy Disney being the day-to-day operator. And I think we've often focused so much on these inspirational leaders with this great vision and not necessarily spent enough time about the master executor, the master operator who is there making sure that vision turns into reality. Let's be honest, is probably spending an awful lot of time saying to that great visionary leader, oh, that's a great idea. Thanks very much for that, Steve. Let's put that in the future maybe pile. So let's leave that one to the side. Let's just keep doing a good job of this and keeping them grounded and keeping them on the saying no. And I think that management skill, which has always been the thing that's probably made the biggest difference day to day, isn't the one that we talk about day to day, isn't the one that we focus on. And certainly every leadership course I've been on, every leadership book I've read, has all been leadership. It's all been that, how do you have this inspiring vision? How do you go about this? And far less is about how do you turn that into reality? How do you execute that? How do you keep things organized? And I've certainly found in my education career, my business career, that when you focus on, I've got this vision, I've settled on that, I'm going to ignore all of my other bright ideas, I'm going to focus on executing these ones, that's when you get to success. That's when things start to really make a difference. I just worry that as we're entering the second half of the decade, that we're not putting enough emphasis on that. And I think the world's shifting to a point where we can't sacrifice that anymore. And humans, as opposed to AI, are really going to have to take some serious ownership on the management side of things.
Yeah, it's a really interesting perspective on it, because it sort of feels like you can't have one without the other, because you don't just want lots of leaders who are leading and then nothing's getting done. That management piece in business, the reality of, and I know this, and I know you know this very well, the reality of running a business day to day goes far beyond the leadership. It is also it's the getting stuff done. It's the turning up and solving problems and getting on with it, even when you're overcoming a challenge or whatever it is. So the management, as you say, is essential that's recognized. But also you need the leadership in order to align people to the vision, align people to a shared direction, and I guess facilitate a sense of belonging. So what does that balance look like for you? Like, in your experience, how do businesses find that balance?
Yeah, I think it's rare, but it does happen where one person can embody that leadership and that vision. Sometimes you come across someone who's able to tread both lines very well. They're able to be the inspiring leader. They're able to be the effective manager. But I think the odds are stacked against us in that sort of scenario. Even if you do have those capabilities, you've got the human factor that can work against you there of people want to pigeonhole you in their brain. They want to pigeonhole you as that person is the inspirational leader, or that person is the day-to-day manager, in the same way that we want to pigeonhole everyone. It's easy to pigeonhole me as, the person who used to be a teacher. It's easy to go into that sort of mode, and then we pigeonhole people. The same with that day-to-day execution. Your team wants to look at someone and go, okay, if I want to be reminded of who we are, what we stand for, the way we do things, and where we're going as an organization, I'm going to think about John. But if I then want to think about, okay, what do I do today in order to make sure that the vision that John has put in place, then I'm going to go to Gemma, and Gemma is going to actually provide that execution. And I must be clear here, I wasn't talking about you there, Gemma. I was talking about Gemma, our COO at SpotDev, who is our day-to-day operator, and just making sure that there's that balance so that when people are thinking about the organization, there's an embodiment of that. And equally, there's an accountability of that. There's someone who is responsible every day for that vision and aligning people and inspiring people and making sure, you asked me earlier, what gets me out of bed in the morning, making sure that the team wants to get out of bed in the morning. But then we need someone who is there that once they are out of bed, once they are at their desk, that they're actually able to execute meaningfully. And I think having two people sitting in those two different seats is good for our human nature of pigeonholing. It helps to refine that. And it allows us to be expert at the leadership or the management side of things in the first place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And it's actually been I feel like it's something I've stumbled across myself. I'd like to say with intention, but I think it was just learning as you go, as most people in business do. Around, I've grown HubGem from the ground up. And, as part of that, I've had to be everything. I've worn all the hats, as
Yeah.
I'm sure you have in your journey too.
Yeah.
You can't do, there was no one to lead to begin with. So it was all about the management. And then as we've grown and scaled, that leadership piece has become really important. And, as soon as I started hiring, that became critical, that we were all moving in the right direction together. But what you find, I think, when you reach a point, as you say, it's quite hard to then be the person that is consistently doing both. And I know now, like, I'm able to step into the more leadership, the vision, the direction, the team alignment piece because of my incredible team who are exceptional managers. So yeah, you mentioned skills a couple of times. If you were to whittle it down to key skills for both leaders and for managers, what would you say like the top 2 or 3 are?
Gosh, that is quite the question, isn't it? Let's start with leaders. I think that might be slightly easier. Is exploration, is understanding the world, is analyzing the world around them, in particular the market that they're operating in. It's taking the time to think about where everyone else is sitting in that and to wonder what's the gap in that market or what's the portion of that market that you can execute within, that you can go after, and that you could really make a meaningful difference in. And it's the skill of aligning everyone, inspiring everyone. Let's go back to that phrase, inspiring everyone to all go in that direction, creating the compelling case for why your organization needs to go there in that direction and needs to come across in a certain way, and making sure that you've got the ability to, yes, synthesize that information of what's around you and then paint the picture of the future. And painting a picture of a future is really, really quite a challenge, isn't it? Because everyone comes with their preconception of the way the world is going to be because of how it has been for them. And you need to draw everyone from their A to your B. And that means drawing hundreds of pathways sometimes and being able to see that on behalf of your team, being able to draw that out on behalf of your team and being prepared to do those tiny little nudges along the way that keep you to that journey. It's quite a long answer for skills. I would have loved to have given you just a few nouns or something, but I think it's probably the only way I can explain that. But for managers, I think the first thing is the top skill is managing the leader and being able to say, no, John, that's not something we should be working on right now. It's a great idea, but it contradicts this, or we haven't become experts enough at this yet to be able to execute on that. So if the time is still right by the time we've executed that, then let's go in that direction. So that ability to manage up, to say no, to be a partner to the leader, and to hold up a mirror to today for the leader and help them to understand everyone's aids. I think that's an important thing. But then also just the relentless execution, sort of the graceful grind of every day of, yeah, this is how we're going to do things. This is the way we are going to operate day to day. And if we do this enough, if we repeat that process every single day, then we'll get to where our leader has said we need to be. And that day-to-day reassurance to people that they are doing the right thing, and equally that willingness to, again, do little nudges, not on the way to A, but on the way to keeping that circle a perfectly graceful grind.
Yeah, you really painted that picture very well. And I see it and actually can apply it to any team that I've ever been in, any leader or manager I've ever had. I think we've all will, when you think of a good leader or a good manager, immediately we'll all have people spring to mind who really knew the role, right? Knew what they were doing and applied themselves. You mentioned there about, I guess, the quirk that is we are humans and not robots in doing this, which is one of my favorite things to talk about, but also it does present some challenges. So at the Happy Workplace, we talk a lot about culture. as something you consciously create and manage. And that's got to be that balance, right, of the leadership and the management and I guess the accountability as well. So from your experience, how do you maintain a strong culture and vision while still holding people accountable for outcomes?
It's a very fair question. And I think for a long time, I got this very wrong. And it wasn't something that came very naturally to me. I thought it was my job as a leader to keep our team happy. And that's why just the name of what you're doing, the happy workplace, it really resonates with me because I really thought that was my job to keep people happy. And that means that you end up making some really strategically cultural errors, really, really big errors, because you start acting like, oh, well, they're not happy about this. I need to change that so that they're happy. Whereas really what you want is a team who are happy to be in the organization you've built. They want to be here. And so it's your job to create a culture and an environment that is a magnet for the people who would want to be in that culture in the first place, and to then make it easy for them to join a team, take away the obstacles to that sort of person who's going to enjoy working in that environment, and make it easy to join, easy to stay, and easy to do their best work. And then when you get someone who just isn't going to be energized by that culture, it's your obligation to work with them to either help them to see the world through the way the organization sees it and the culture sees it, and to help them get inspired by that. Or if not, then work with them to help them find somewhere that they can. And you'll know this from the education world. It's in the education space, it's incredibly unusual where someone getting a job somewhere else is a surprise, because you can't just go and take a random day of leave in order to go and have an interview. You have to go and ask permission to go to an interview. So everyone knows John's going for an interview. When I came into the business world, it was such a shock to me that everyone interviews in secret. John's thinking of going somewhere else. This is a really big conspiracy. Can you believe it? And everyone's talking about it behind the back. Don't tell the boss. Don't want to be mistreated. To me, that's mind blowing. And whenever I've heard that someone wants to leave because the culture we've built for them isn't the right culture for them, or they are ready for opportunities that we can't grant them, then I'm very keen to help them find that next opportunity, because they're going to leave either way. They're going to leave if I know about it or not. So when they do leave, I want them to become a wonderful advert for SpotDev, because if they go somewhere else and they're an underperformer, or they don't perform well in the interview, or whatever skills tests they're not properly prepared for, they reflect badly on SpotDev. And I'm just forcing them to stay in this environment that they're not right for or they've outgrown. So I'll do mock interviews with them. I'll read their CV and give them tips on it. I'll say, oh, they're likely to have this particular challenge here because I spoke to them a couple of years ago and this is something that they were struggling with. And I know that other people like them are struggling with that now. So definitely be thinking about that ahead of the interview. And I'll coach people to leave our organization when the time is right for them, or if the culture is wrong. Because it's not my job to keep them happy. It's my job to create an environment for the right people to do their best work while SpotDev is the right place for them, and to create that magnetic culture, and then to help people to move on when that suits them. And that to me is the core of a happy workplace. It's a workplace people want to be at because it just is a good workplace.
I mean, all of that and more. You hear the phrase like "don't block the exit," but actually it goes beyond that. It's a sense of really caring about the individuals and their whole journey. And your organization might be a shorter chapter for them or a longer chapter, or they might have been a really good fit for 2 years, and then actually something in their life has changed where whatever you stand for, your values, your culture is no longer aligned, because people do grow and change. And I think we need to accept that and actually celebrate it a little bit. And if then you can play that part in their growth, then that's you helping a fellow human out on their path, knowing that people don't stay the same forever. And actually, as you say, if they're not aligned, if they do want something else, it's not your job to change your company to meet their needs. It's about supporting them, still getting the best out of them that you can through their time with you, but ultimately like guiding them. And I think that's that coaching piece you did there. I think it'd be incredible to see more of that. And I hear your point on interviews being sort of done in secret. It is very different, yeah, to education. Everyone knows everything that's going on. And also you naturally people would, let's say you're a teacher in one school and you're going to move to teach in another school, you'll know the people at that school, you'll know, like, they're probably local. Like, it's quite a close-knit world. One thing I've noticed as a CEO is that when a team member comes to me and to tell me that they're thinking of leaving, or they are leaving, or they've got an interview or whatever it is, they, even though we've worked so hard on culture and creating safety and trust, they can still come to me and I can see the angst in them. I think because of this attitude of, oh, we don't talk about it, and they come almost feeling so guilty. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that they've told me, because then we all know where we're at and we can actually work together to find the best outcome for everybody. And also it's sort of celebrating someone for taking an action. If something in life isn't aligned, then take an action to align it, and let's work together to build a life that's aligned, whether that's for each individual or for the company. So yeah, I think it is very different in the business world, and I think that does come down to safety and culture and trust.
Yeah, and it comes down to making sure people understand what you see as loyalty. I think people don't want to seem disloyal, and therefore they don't say anything about the fact that they're leaving. And yeah, I'm sure there are poor leaders and poor managers who will see someone leaving as an act of disloyalty. But to my mind, giving me the opportunity to practically find their successor and to do a better job of finding a successor because the time pressure is reduced. Let's start scoping out the market, looking for that. Is the fact that Bob is moving on, is that an opportunity to reset this part of the organization and to prepare it for the company's next stage of growth? But equally, it's an act of loyalty in that someone is showing me what their career pathway is and saying, I trust you to help me find that next step. And I would much rather be on the receiving end of that so that I can help them into the future. And again, it's another act of loyalty because it comes back to that advert piece. If they do really well, then when they move on, they can speak very fondly of their time having worked here. They can speak very fondly of the work that they did there. And then that just spreads throughout the universe and it leads to a better outcome for everyone involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned there about the work that they do. Now, both of us have businesses in the tech space, and we cannot have this episode without talking about AI. So you've mentioned in some of our previous conversations that AI is going to amplify the pressure on managers and how managers work with AI, right? So that we can handle this greater complexity with perhaps fewer human resources or different places for the human resources. What does that future look like to you?
Well, okay, I suppose you're calling out my leadership capabilities, aren't you? Paint the future for me, John. Paint the future. I think that AI is going to force us to think much more about humans as managers rather than humans as leaders or even humans as executors. That management capability of making sure other resources are aligned to the vision is going to increase. And there are just simple, practical things about the reality of working with AI that makes me think that. So first up is, regardless of whether or not you believe AI is going to take jobs or take away jobs, I think AI is going to take on jobs. AI is going to become responsible for identifying whether a lead is a good fit. AI is going to become responsible for writing the first draft of copies, whatever that might be. And because AI is doing that, AI never sleeps, AI is much faster than the human, etc. That means that our capacity as an organization to do these things increases, and the scale at which we can create content, the scale at which we can manage, let's go with a marketing campaign, the scale at which we can manage a marketing campaign increases. So maybe today, I don't think there's a single marketer on earth that's probably responsible for just one campaign at a time, but maybe today you're responsible for just 3 campaigns at a time as a marketer. Well, with the resources of AI, is there any particularly good reason why you couldn't be expected to manage 30 campaigns? I'm not going to suggest that that's a good idea, but let's work on that assumption. I certainly think there are going to be organizations that put that hypothesis forward and test it. Why can't you manage 30 marketing campaigns as a head of marketing or a marketing manager? Why can't you do that if we've given you a team of 35 AI employees who are all responsible for specific parts of it? The question to why not is, or the possible answer to why not is, well, because we need excellent management skills in order to do that. Managing free campaigns, you've got to store free campaigns in your head at any one time. That's in itself reasonably demanding because those campaigns have many moving parts. So if we're scaling that to 30, goodness me, the mental cognitive load of that is ginormous. So how are we going to become really, really strong managers, dwarfing our management capabilities today to manage the AI employees to execute on that array of 30 campaigns? It doesn't have to be 30, it could be 10. That's still much more than most of us are managing on a day-to-day basis. So that cognitive load, that workload is almost certainly going to increase. We need to get better managers to be able to handle that. And then what I often hear when I first posit this to folks is, well, can't the AI do that for us? Can't the AI help us with the management of it? I'm sure it can help, but at the moment, all of the indications are that AI is not very good at management. AI is great at content creation at scale, helping you to personalize at scale, so on and so forth. But at management at any scale, I'm yet to see evidence that it's great. And I'm seeing plenty of evidence to the contrary. And my favorite example of this is Anthropic, the makers of Claude. They ran an experiment where they put a special version of Claude that they called Claudius. So they must have been like Roman history aficionados. They put Claudius in charge of a tiny business, which was a vending machine. And they gave the AI, Claudius, access to human and virtual resources to do this. The virtual resources were like API connections to go and order more stock. And then the human resources were the ability to send an email to probably the folks over at Anthropic to go and bring that stock and stock it into the vending machine. Because at the moment, I don't think the robots are quite able to stock a vending machine very well. And you'd think that would work really well. It's a really simple business. AI is super smart. And by some measures, its IQ is much better than your average human. So surely it's going to do a good job of that. But the net worth just gradually tanked over time. I think they started it with like a float of $1,000, and that just completely disappeared. The vending machine, Claudius, was bankrupt by the end of the process. And we've all had bad times in business. I'm sure that I could find a way to fail as the manager of a vending machine business, but it doesn't speak well to AI's capability to help us as humans, as managers. Our management skills that come to the fore to manage all of the AI employee assets that we've got available to us, agents for want of a better word, for want of a much better word, then our management skills to come to the fore to manage the workload capacity that comes from the excellent array of AI employees, and then the management skill of managing the business factors that surround it, perhaps supported by an AI for brainstorming and considering options, but that judicious management skill of making business decisions about how to price, to how to deliver, what to order, etc. That all still needs to come from a human in the end.
Yeah, I mean, that is an exceptional story. And I love hearing these stories about how, because there's lots out there about how AI is advancing, right? And how exciting it is. And I'm the first to get excited about it.
Oh yeah, me too.
But there's still so much that humans need to do. There'll be different stuff if, as you say, AI will be helping with very specific tasks and roles. But what you mentioned there, I think is critical. And that's down to how we make decisions, because there's so much in decision making as a manager or as a leader or as anyone actually in a team, any human. When you make a decision, there's the logic, right? And I'm going to suggest that AI can probably do this quite well, which is data, join up some dots to decision, easy. But actually, when we're talking about multiple moving parts, which in a business is everything, right? There's always, you move A, it's going to affect B and C and D in some varying way. Actually, in them decisions, we're incredible meaning makers, and we join up dots and we tell narratives and connect concepts in a way that AI just can't do yet. Who knows if it'll get there? We don't know that. But I do think a large part of that is intuition. So this is a topic, and obviously, that I'm very very interested in. But only 5% of our brain is conscious. 95% of it is a vast storehouse of information. Every bit of data that we can't consciously process is being subconsciously processed beneath the surface. And, down to, did that person give me a funny look yesterday? I hadn't consciously realized it, but now I'm thinking maybe they weren't right this week. And it's all of these. So we're still dealing with humans in a workplace, human decision makers and human purchasers, right? The customers of that vending machine are humans making decisions. So whilst you look at the data and the logic of, oh, maybe we need to order more X because of this, what about the fact that, today is a very rainy day? Actually, rainy day, maybe humans are seeking out a little bit more comfort. So their buying behavior might change based on something that is a very human felt experience. But intuitively, as humans, we're able to, by joining up all the dots, even the bits we don't even realize we're doing, recognize these patterns that are based on human emotions and human feelings. It feels to be quite a way off for AI, if ever. So I would love to dig in a little bit deeper into business decision making. So there's logic and there's gut feelings. And I think anyone in business who's grown a business, made decisions in a business, has, everyone knows what a gut feeling is. What's your experience of making decisions? How much do you rely on logic, especially in the world you're in? There's a lot of logic and data versus intuition. And do you have any examples of where following your gut has paid off or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I'm halfway through reading Rory Sutherland's book, Alchemy, and he keeps talking about the difference between logic and psychologic, as he calls it, which is, again, essentially just trusting a gut and thinking about the human part of the equation. So that's very much front of mind for me at the moment. But I think in terms of decision making in all parts of life, but certainly in business, it's easy to make the decision too late. And I've definitely been guilty of this in the past. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm at the point now where my gut's telling me to do this. Some of the information is telling me it's a good idea. I don't think I've got enough information. So I'm going to hold off until I'm more certain. And then you don't execute. You never get enough information. But then Acme goes and does exactly that in your market, does exactly what your gut was telling you to do. And you see it work beautifully. And you're like, oh, I could have done that if only I'd had the courage to go with my gut. And sometimes we are too hesitant on that, and we could have just had a punt at that and it wouldn't have hurt at all because we can reverse the decision very easily. And I can think of plenty of times where I've thought about that. There are things around sort of heavily productized versions of business. And I looked at this in a previous business, considered the idea of making it a fully productized marketing business. Essentially, you came to an e-commerce shop and you bought this. Then a couple of days later, you received it and revisions. You would then click a button to productize it. And lo and behold, later on, there was a company, I can't remember the name of the company now. Went and did that idea 6 months later, executed it beautifully, went really well, and they went on to thrive as an organization. Could have done that, but I just wasn't certain enough. I didn't have enough data, so I didn't make the choice. And do you know what? It was a very reversible decision. I could have made it a policy with, well, if your company is below this size and whatnot, then come to this page. That's how you buy from us. But if you're a mega enterprise organization, we sell to you how we always did. There would have been no harm in that. If it hadn't worked out, we just stop operating like that and we get rid of that little e-com store. I should have trusted my gut, should have taken advantage of that. But then it's much harder when making that decision is irreversible or very, very hard to reverse, where you have to going back to that concept of leadership and aligning everyone's A to a B, where you then have to change your B and move it over here. And that's a much, much harder take on things. And I think probably for me, the big learning about that was when I split one of my companies into multiple companies, and one of those companies became SpotDev. And for SpotDev, I said, okay, this company does 3 things. It does do more than 3 things now, but at the time it did migrations, integrations, and automations for HubSpot customers. And that was all that we were going to do. And it was way before that was a norm in the HubSpot space. It was still lots of folks who were marketing agencies who were then going to just say, oh, and we do a bit of migration, and we do a bit of integration, etc. I was like, no, we don't do any marketing work. That's going to live off in a completely different company, a completely different line of business. And SpotDev is just going to do this highly technical work. If I'm answering your question of what's paid off, that's certainly one that paid off, where I had information in front of me that that's where the market was going. It was not definitive. Certainly HubSpot was asking for partners to be more and more technical, but I don't think at that time they'd really pushed very hard for that or shown their cards on that. But my gut was, we could do quite a good job of that. We've got the right people, we've got the right vision, we understand how it works, we've done good work along those lines in the past. So let's really focus migrations, integrations, automations for HubSpot customers. And slowly we've added extra stuff as more capabilities have become apparent from our team. So we now do much more in the way of websites, highly interactive customer portals, all of this sort of thing. But it all just builds on that heavy, you need a software engineer at some point along this way in order to build this product. That consistency, that certainly paid off for us. And SpotDev is really thriving as a result of taking that bold, highly focused decision that we didn't have quite enough data to be confident of. And it would have been very, very hard to reverse that. Oh yeah, suddenly we're a marketing agency now. It just wouldn't have gone well.
Yeah, and I think those are, those sort of stories, and I have my own of those, but they're seen across business, right? Those Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, Oprah Winfrey, they've all referred to, I just had this hunch. The data was sort of there. There was a little bit, or there wasn't much, but I just knew. And they're some of the biggest names in business, and there's many, many, many more. And I do think you have to build that trust in your own intuition, which will improve over time. The more you're involved and the more decisions you make, the more you learn to trust, and the more data you will ultimately be holding in that unconscious part of your mind. For me, it was when I started HubGem, and at the time, HubSpot partners were all marketing agencies. And whilst I was from a marketing background, that's not what I wanted to do. And so I didn't have any role models to look to, but I'm like, what I want to do is very specifically, we're going to implement, we're going to onboard, we're going to train people, we're going to do some strategy in education, HubSpot, and that's it. And, at the time, I actually remember a lot of people saying to me, yeah, but you must do this as well, right? And you do this as well. And I was like, no, I don't do that. And actually, fast forward to now, the guidance is niche, go know what you're doing, know what your services are, and know your market. There was a risk attached, and I didn't have the data, frankly, to fully back up my gut feeling of stick to that niche, don't try and diversify. And there were many times where people outside of that niche had come to me and said, will you work with us? And, there was 1 or 2 that we did, but across the board, no, our marketing, everything is geared towards this niche. There was a big risk, but there was that deep knowing that actually I just feel like this is the right decision. And that's hugely, that's why we've been on the journey we have as a company. And it's interesting because AI does not have intuition. AI has the data that we feed it as humans, and it can have lots of data, perhaps, certainly more data than our brains would be able to hold cognitively. But we are humans with lived experience of decades of knowing how humans work. And for as long as the customers are humans, and since humans are the ones, at least for now, with money and with homes and bills to pay, I expect that will continue to be the case for a while. I think it makes for a very interesting time. The more I see AI, the more I also am drawn to intuition. And it feels like there's some weird relationship between the two. So As we wrap up the conversation, which I have loved exploring all of these themes with you, let's bring it together. You founded companies, you have grown companies, you have experimented along the way, you've learned things along the way. I'm going to make this quite hard, but if you had to give one piece of advice to founders or team leaders who really want to navigate the unknown period ahead, let's say months and perhaps years ahead, balancing everything we've discussed today around AI, culture, accountability. If there was one golden nugget of advice, what would you share?
For founders in particular, but yes, team leaders as well. In fact, yeah, definitely for both. My one piece of advice would be stop doing it yourself. It's so easy to look at something and go, oh, well, I can do that. I'll take that on. And to then end up taking it on and possibly doing a good job, possibly a better job than anyone else on the team could have done. But then no one's doing your job, or you're doing your job part-time. If you are a team leader, if you are a founder, if you are running a business, your job is to be looking at where B currently is and making sure everyone's pathway is still pointing towards B. If Sally is here responsible for executing on something and you take that work off her, you are taking your eyes off B and you're focusing on A. You need to be focusing on B and making sure Sally is the person getting you to A2 and then keeping that execution going. So my top advice is stop doing it yourself.
Yeah. Good advice. Again, something you really learn on the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, as you try, you realize you can't do it all anymore. And actually, if you want to continue to grow and scale, especially in a rapidly changing world, you must be looking ahead. You can't be looking at every little detail. You need people on your team who are really good at that so that you can look ahead. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed that. If anyone would like to find out more about SpotDev or you, where should they go? What should they do?
You can find us at spotdev.co.uk, or if you can spell Kelleher, which is Kelleher, you should be able to find me on LinkedIn.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.